Welcome to Beyond Campus, a podcast that delves into various topics pertaining to Israel, Zionism, and having a positive connection to Israel on campus and beyond. I'm your host, Destiny Albritton with the Israel on Campus Coalition, and I am thrilled to welcome our first guest, Noa Tishby.
I didn't know it's your first. It's the first podcast.
It's the first ever episode of Beyond Campus.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Noa, to get started, I'm really interested in your journey. You started out in the entertainment industry, actor, producer, and now you are, of course, you're still in the entertainment industry, but you've really become this like gold standard for activism and for public diplomacy and defending Israel. And you're also a political figure. How did you end up here? Like, tell us about that journey.
First of all, thank you so much. Second, I'm definitely not a political figure because I would like to be able to continue to represent the Jewish people and the state of Israel and, whatever is right in humanity and society in a way that's non-partisan. So I try to make sure that I'm very kind of middle of the road in that sense and not be too vocal about anything that don't have to do with that, because I think the problems that we're dealing with are so much worse at the moment. So I'm just kind of focusing on that. But it's an interesting question because this answer might take the entire podcast because it's a long journey. So I was born and raised. I'll just do it really quickly and. A lot of it is in my books. If any of you or the listeners or anybody read my book, I'm sorry for repeating myself. So I'll just do it kind of quickly. But it basically, I was born and raised in Tel Aviv to a very, very Zionist family, very modern, very liberal, very progressive, very kind of left-leaning from like the days of the kibbutz and like the Air Force. So very much like that, and also extremely Zionist. And they were very involved in the establishment of the state of Israel. So my grandmother was one of the founders of the first kibbutz in Israel, which is the first kibbutz in the world, basically. My great-grandfather moved to Jerusalem in 1922 to start the Ministry of Industry and Trade for the Yishuv. And my grandfather was Israel's not only Israel's first ambassador to Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria, Ivory Coast. He was literally the first representative that the state of Israel sent to the entire continent of Africa. And he was one of the people that spearheaded Israel's help for all these Western African countries in establishing themselves and getting independence from the United Kingdom, which is what Israel got as well in 1948, independence from colonialist Britain. So he was a huge proponent. He was one of the founders of this endeavor. So I grew up with this in kind of like my background, but I didn't care about it at all. So I couldn't give a shit. Sorry, can we curse here? Sure. I couldn't give a S. I couldn't care. I couldn't care less. And I started my career in the entertainment industry when I was a kid. So I was very drawn to like acting and singing and writing and producing and all of that. And that was a huge part of my life. And the only thing I did, and like it was my way of defining myself. If you'd asked me when I was like 18, like, who are you? Yeah. I would have said, I'm a girl, I'm an actress, I'm a singer, I'm an artist, I'm a citizen of the world, I'm a blah, blah, blah. Like I would have said I'm Israeli. But like Israeli and Jewish would have been like number 20 on the list. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't anything in my identity. It was something that I took for granted. So I took for granted being Jewish, and I took for granted the safety and security of Israel, because it was like I was just kind of like raised with that. I wasn't even aware that anti-Semitism was still a thing. Like I grew up in Israel with like zero anti-Semitism around me, right? So this was all kind of like in the back of my mind without me even kind of noticing that it's there, until I moved to the United States to further my career in the entertainment industry. And I did great. I was like acting and singing, and I was signed to like a major record label, to MCA. And I was traveling all over the world to like record with the best producers all over the world. But throughout the entire time, I kept being asked, like I suddenly realized what it means to be a Jew as a minority, a Jew in the diaspora. And I'm like, I kept getting asked like all these questions about Israel. and about being Jewish, but mostly about Israel. And I realized that people have no idea about what Israel is. Like they have no idea what they're talking about. But then on the other side of it, they have a lot of very strong opinions, like a lot. And I'm like, oh my God, you literally, if I don't know anything about this governance system or what's happening in Denmark, I'm not going to have an argument with you about this. Like, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? So I started my advocacy kind of, I almost fell into it because I couldn't shut up. I just couldn't shut up. I was like, I kept talking to people and explaining it to them and like, well, there's a difference between Hamas and the PA. Let me tell you where Gaza is, very basic stuff for an Israeli, but for anybody like in America or abroad, it was news. And it was news to me that it was news to them. I'm like, whoa. So it kind of something that took over my life. That was always the biggest passion as a young adult, right? Not as a teen. But then I realized like, oh my God, it's actually the most important thing for me is to explain my country and explain my heritage. And because what I realized was that the safety and security of the state of Israel is not a given. And I realized that Israel is the single consistent democracy in the Middle East. In the Middle East, it's the biggest ally of the West. It's a country that mirrors our values in America and the West the most. It's a miracle because it was just established and like all the achievements that it has. Yet it's the only country in the world in which its legitimacy is being questioned. And I realized living outside of Israel that I have a role to play and that there aren't a lot of people that can actually explain it in a way that makes sense to us in America, because I have this background as an Israeli, but I'm also American. I live here. I'm a citizen, like I love America. So I found myself constantly having to have these conversations. And I founded an organization, that I'm not going to get into it right now, like the first online advocacy and rapid response organization dedicated to Israel. But then 2 years ago, I decided that I realized that there's no book that tells the story of Israel in a way that's understandable, literally in a way that's like all the books about Israel, which were like, there are like a bazillion of them, right? They were all very like heavy and heady and like history, like, and I'm like, okay, none of my friends, basically, the ones that aren't obsessed with history as I am and you are, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, but like a lot of people are not that obsessed with like history and don't want to know every single battle that happened in the War of Independence. Like a lot of these books were very much in the weeds, and there's no book that tells the story of Israel in a way that's kind of like a little bit more meta and a little bit more, and just in a way that's easy to understand. So I wrote this book and it came out almost 2 years ago, and it's called Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. And I was right. There wasn't a book like that, and there was a constituency out there for it, and people find it extraordinarily helpful. And it's also the first history book about Israel ever written by a woman.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't realize that.
I didn't know that either until I was writing the proposal. Yeah. And when you write the proposal for the book, there's a section called competitive analysis, in which you have to go down all the other books that are in this world, in this field, and how yours is different. So when I did the competitive analysis, I'm finding all these authors like, Benny Maurice and Ari Shavit and Ronan Bergman and all these amazing authors, right? Incredible people, and Yossi Klein Halevi and Mati Friedman. And I'm like, oh, this book is amazing. This book is amazing. And I'm like, all right, where are the women? And I'm like, where are the women? Oh my God, where are the women? And, excluding Golda Meir's biography. And also there's an Israeli historian. Her name is Anita Shapira. She's amazing. And her books were translated into English. But there's not like an American woman that wrote a book about Israel. So I did. And here we are.
I'm really fascinated to hear that being like Jewish, being Israeli, you didn't like anti-Semitism wasn't something you really thought about still existing, because I'm not Jewish and I'm from the middle of Missouri where there isn't a huge Jewish community. And I don't think I even met a Jewish person until I was maybe like 19 or 20 years old, honestly. And I was like in college and I was just getting really involved in this subject. So it's interesting for me. And, obviously at that point in my life, I didn't realize how prevalent and still an issue. Anti-Semitism is in our country and in our society. So it's really interesting for me to hear that, you had a similar, rude awakening with
Yes.
how much of an issue this still is, but you're Jewish, you're Israeli. That's very interesting to hear.
Yeah. Why I'm interested in how did you get drawn into this subject? Like what made
Oh
you
my
kind of
gosh. Yeah.
I
So
know you're interviewing me, but I
yeah,
find this really interesting. So
yeah,
let me flip it on you. It's the first episode.
yeah.
Who cares?
So I grew up in a very pro-Israel church where I grew up
Mm,
hearing about the heroes of the Bible and how they were, part of the Jewish people and that we should, pray for Israel and pray for peace in Jerusalem. But like as a kid, I was, just picturing like people in Bible costumes, like wandering the wilderness, like, and I live in like central Missouri where there just isn't a huge Jewish community. But then I got to college and I'm studying international studies, focusing in peace studies, which just means like conflict, basically. Um, and I'm hearing, yeah, that's what it means. It's like conflict studies for like social justice
right.
warriors. And I'm hearing people say these just crazy things about Israel, like Israel bombs buildings of women and children in Gaza. And I'm like, what? That's a big statement. And so I
And
just
a
like
lie.
started, right, it's a lie. It's a lie. But like I
It's a
just
great
started,
statement. It's a big statement and also full of,
right, it gets a lot of attention and it got my attention. And I just started wondering like what in the world is going on with modern Israel and what, if any connection does it have to me, a nice Christian girl from Missouri, right? And I realized that, modern Israel is like the continuation of what the heroes of my faith, that these, early leaders of the Jewish people, like they became heroes by contributing to Jewish self-determination, right? Like Moses, Esther, Nehemiah, they all contributed something to this movement. Like they were Zionists. So like I just like realized like, wait, the people of Israel live, right? And there, this is a continuous story that I can be a part of and leave my mark on also. And here we are.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I mean, thank you so much because um thank you for being an ally.
Thank
Like a lot of people are like asking this question, being an ally to minority communities is something that's it's a big thing. And because the Jewish community is not underrepresented in a lot of places, people tend to think that anti-Semitism is not a thing anymore and that it's and we need allies and we don't have a lot. Like it's so thank you. If I can speak on behalf of the entire Jewish population of the world, thank you. Because
thank you.
really, yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's a privilege. It's a privilege, truly. And and kind of speaking of, something you mentioned, not feeling like there's a lot of support for the Jewish community. The last, few months, I think like in this fall, we saw some really upsetting comments from uh, celebrities like Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And I'm kind of tired of, of talking about them, but I do think it is important to like talk
Oh.
about the anti-Semitism that has been coming from some of these celebrities. But I also know that there are, with the concern and the stress over Black Jewish relations
Relationships, yeah.
from those comments. I also know that there are efforts being made to um, invest in and care for that relationship. And I know there's the Black Jewish Entertainment Alliance that you've been
Alliance.
a part of.
Mhm.
Can you talk a bit about that and um, how like effective building those relationships have been?
Well, I'm first of all, it's heartbreaking. What's happening right now is absolutely heartbreaking. Between all those names that you've mentioned, they are perpetuating tropes that are literally 2,000 years old. The problem with anti-Semitism is that it's not just an anti-Jewish racism. It's a shape-shifting conspiracy theory, and it sometimes looks like, oh my God, these Jews are like, vermins or whatever the Nazis would say, right? These Jews are scum of the earth and they're lower race and whatever, but it sometimes almost also sounds like the Jews control the media. The Jewish control, right, is not a compliment. It's a trope that caused bloodshed.
Right.
Right? It's not a compliment. We've heard this before and we know this leads, where this leads. This can lead to a lot of heartache. So to have it be perpetuated by these cultural leaders who are Black Americans is heartbreaking, because when you know the history of the Jewish people and the Black people, specifically around the social justice movement and human rights movements in America, but also going all the way to the early days of Zionism, which I'll get back to in a second, it's heartbreaking that this is where we're at right now. So as a part of the research for my book, I read a book called Alt Neuland. Alt Neuland is the book written by Theodor Herzl in 1902, okay? That was basically, he created in his mind, he basically created the vision for a Jewish state reemerging in the land of Israel, in the indigenous land of the Jewish people. Because, the Jews came from Judea. Just saying. Anyway, and he wrote in that book, and I'm reading the book, and it's very utopian, it's very beautiful and all that. And in the book, there's a Black character, and they are talking about the oppression of Blacks in the world. And he's talking about that Blacks deserves the people of Africa and the people that they deserve self-determination, that the Jewish people have to stand by the Black community and help them, and that it doesn't, that slavery is wrong and all these in 1902. It is beyond early, right? And this is the founding document of Zionism. Right. Alt Neuland, Theodor Herzl's writing are the founding documents of Zionism. So this alliance between between these two marginalized communities, right? And I'm not gonna, we have to go to Rabbi Heschel and like the Freedom Riders and all the Jewish people that have stood. The NAACP was created by Jews as well. So Jews and Blacks, Jewish people and Black people's alliance throughout history has always been extraordinarily strong, and it has eroded recently. And to hear those people perpetuating these tropes that are basically a lie, that are leaning on the doctrine, the extreme doctrine of a group called the Black Jewish Israelites, the Black Hebrew Israelites, which we don't have to get into right now, but like the extreme fractions of that group are extraordinarily anti-Semitic and full of hate and racist against Jews, is heartbreaking. Having said that, I am extraordinarily optimistic because I know that we have a natural alliance that the majority of Black people and the majority of Jewish people know that it's there. So we're putting it into, high gear to course correct this, not because the numbers are against us, because I do believe that the majority of the Black community is for the Jewish people and the majority of the Jewish people is for the Black community. I don't have a doubt in that. But the ones that are against it, the ones that are perpetuating these anti-Semitic tropes are so loud. They just have a lot of followers and they just have a big microphone. Mm-hmm. But I am not at all dismayed. I'm extraordinarily optimistic about this relationship because we have always been natural alliance and allies. We have always been natural allies, and we're going to continue being natural allies. And those people can go, into the dumpster of history at the end of the day. And we're not going to let them ruin that. So it is heartbreaking, but it is not the origin of both our movements for human rights are the same. We're allies, and we're going to continue to do that. Right, but they should shut up at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They really should. Shut up already.
Yeah, no, totally. I think the point that you made that, yes, there have been people with big microphones, as you put it, saying these egregious things, but there's so many who don't share those views, and we've got to continue celebrating those people.
100%. 100%. Look, one of my best friends, my closest friends and allies, and somebody that I've been close to for a very long time is Congressman Richie Torres. He is the congressman from New York, district number 15. He is a progressive Democrat. He's Black, half Latin, and he's a huge ally of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And he gets it. And we've known each other for a very long time. And he is the one that gets the most upset about this, because it's like, I represent Black communities. I'm in the Black caucus. I'm in the Black this. I've got in my district in the Bronx. It's like, that's not what Black people think. Right. So long term, I am not concerned about this. But if I can just have a conversation with those, specifically those two people, or just have them be a little bit quieter, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be really great.
Yeah. Speaking about people we wish were a little quieter.
Just quiet. I'm not like, it's
Yeah.
freedom of speech, right? We live in America. You have the right to speak, but I also have the right to tell you that you're full of shit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, agreed. Um, but yeah, like speaking of speaking of that, you've spoken pretty powerfully about the normalization of anti-Semitic rhetoric from celebrities. And with that, you have these other celebrities like the Hadid family that are using these phrases like from the river to the sea, and we know many of us understand that chant and the rhetoric affiliated with that as being anti-Semitic and calling for the destruction of Israel. What can like the average person do? What can we do about hearing these celebrities use this language? Like, do you think campaigns like, speaking about those things like are impactful? Like, what would you tell like the average like Instagram user who like maybe follows them on Instagram? Like, how should they, like, what can we do about it?
The most important thing, first of all, is to understand what it is.
Hmm.
If you look at a map, from the river to the sea is talking about from the Jordan River, which
Right.
is the eastern border of Israel and Jordan, to the Sea of the Mediterranean Sea. So from that river to that sea, there are a lot of Jews. Okay. So we have to understand that this particular line is not just talking about the destruction of Israel, it's talking about ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people from their ancestral land.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not anti-Semitism, I don't know what is, right?
Let me know if I can help.
Oh, hi, Siri. You can't help right now. Thank you. But thanks for asking. So this is something that we need to understand. And I think that right now, the majority of people that are going to be listening to us are probably college people, right? For you guys to understand what this is, first and foremost, is the most important thing, because then you can go to your faculty and you can go to your other like student like friends, and you can go to the people who are posting these posts online or in a tabling event in your campus and actually have that conversation with them and make them understand that what they're saying is wrong, because some of them just don't. Some of them just don't. I always say that BDS movement, right, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, is an anti-Semitic movement that is intent to the destruction of Israel. They want to have Israel cease to exist. They don't hide it. They talk about it. There are videos. I talk about this in my book, and you can find videos online of the founder of the boycott movement saying, yeah, we don't want Israel in any place of the land. That's what they want. They want to destroy Israel. This is important when you're dealing with this on campus, that the people from your BDS campaigns don't kind of try to manipulate you into thinking that it's something else. Because what they do on campus, BDS, is they hide that intention under this like woke language, right, progressive language of freedom and justice. And it's not a progressive movement. This is something very important to understand. BDS is not a progressive movement. It's a hate movement that is intent on destroying the single Jewish state in the world. Now, if they would be they're sitting on campus now, they're talking about justice, right? A very cool buzzword. So that's fine. But if they would sit there and have a sign above their head, let's ruin a democracy, not a lot of people would come to the table.
You're right.
But that's what they're doing. So it's important for all the listeners, when you actually confront them, have that conversation with them. The conversation to ask a BDS activist is, how many other countries would you like to dismantle? Which other country do you want to dismantle? Do you want to do you want to like dismantle Denmark and Bali and like Australia and, the Philippines, like what, Germany? Like, are you after all countries? Oh, so you're just after one country.
Right.
And that country happens to be Jewish. Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
Hmm. And they usually don't have an answer for that. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like a disproportionate obsession with the single country in the world that is Jewish. There's a name for it. It's called anti-Semitism. It's all fun and game. You can be critical of an Israeli government and Israeli policies all day long, but that's not what BDS is after.
Right.
And they're trying to pretend like they're after that. And a lot of the Jewish supporters of BDS don't know that this is what they're supporting. They don't know. So if you're a Jewish person or a person who is a progressive or whatever, like liberal person, and you're supporting BDS, you really need to understand what it is that you're supporting, because they're hiding the fact that they want to destroy Israel. And if they're going to get their way, that's not going to go down well. So they're advocating for a genocide is what they're advocating for. So really be careful as a student, as a college student, really be careful when you see them. Really be careful.
Mm-hmm. Can you speak to, being Israeli American, can you speak to when like criticism of Israeli policy turns into anti-Semitism?
Yeah. Do you want to dismantle the country? It's very simple. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because if you're against one country in the world, you're against, and that country is Jewish. That's anti-Semitic. What had happened with the BDS movement? It started in 1975 in the UN resolution to brand Zionism as racism, right? So they're trying to say that Zionism is racism, when Zionism is the Jewish right for self-determination and self-governance in their ancestral land, and it's in a Jewish but not exclusively Jewish state. Again, going back to Al Neuland, he talks about the Arab residents of the country and the Christian residents of the country. Like it's never been about having an exclusively Jewish state, right? Zionism is just the Jews' right for a state, Jewish people's right for a state. And if you're against the Jewish people's right for a state, why would the Palestinians deserve a state? So you can't, it's like a mental gymnastics that anti-Zionists can't wrap their heads around.
Right.
So there is no difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And that is only about whether or not Israel should exist. Because that's what BDS and that's what anti-Israel activists are about. Now, do you want to say that you don't like policies of Israel? That's totally fine. I don't like some of Israel's policies as well as American policies. I don't like that either. There are a lot of policies we don't like. But nobody's talking about dismantling America. And Israel's the only country that people are kind of like, yeah, but should it exist though? I'm like, yeah, I mean, really, for real, look it up. Israel's the only country in the world that has its own Wikipedia entry. The legitimacy of the state of Israel. It's the only country. It's the only, it's like, I'm like, and I'm kind of like, it's all fun and games. It's all good. Listen, no country is perfect, but you're obsessing over the Jewish state. Back down. And a lot of people, they don't even see this. They're kind of like, Israel is so bad, and they don't see that they have a subconscious bias against Jews, and that subconscious bias is affecting their opinion about Israel. They don't get that these two are connected. Because if you have a conspiracy theory, if you're anti-Semitic, like subconsciously anti-Semitic, right? Not even consciously, right? Like subconsciously racist, and you kind of go, yeah, those Jews, they control everything, don't they? Then you would think that Israel's the big bad wolf.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. It's like, yeah, because these Jews are. And I'm here to say these Jews are nothing but what you're projecting. We're just a people. It's not a monolith. It's not like saying the blacks are or the Chinese are or the anything are.
Right.
So, but it's a danger to a country, whereas for other races, it's a danger to the race. Here, it's a danger to the country, because that's kind of what they're going after now. Like the anti-Semites of today are going after Israel.
Yeah, it's wild when we're talking about any other people group.
Mm-hmm.
It is clearly wrong to take, one example of something and to apply it as a negative to the entire group, right? The entire Jewish people, or to all of Israelis, or, the entire, state of Israel. But for some reason, when we're talking about Israel or the Jewish people, or, a Jewish person, it's okay.
Joe Rogan yesterday was like talking about Jews, how much Jews love money. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, oh my God.
Insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we were talking about anyone else, that would clearly not be okay. It's really disgusting.
It's horrible.
It's really bad. and speaking of anti-Semitism, all these people that are frustrating to us, something, positive, and the work that you're doing to combat these things and to educate other people on exactly what we're discussing. You became the special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel. You're the first person to serve in that position. Is that correct?
Yep.
Oh, a lot of firsts.
I know.
First woman author of an Israel history book, first person to serve in this position.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How has that platform changed or like impacted your ability to have these conversations?
First of all, it is a great honor to be able to serve in this role when asked. It was a very humbling experience. Second, it falls really well into what I already do. So there's a lot of overlap. But then when I'm asked to specifically represent Israel on a stage of sort, I get a chance to do that. So um I went to testify in front of a congressional hearing in September, and that was a huge honor. It was by parliamentary task force for combating online anti-Semitism. So that was a huge honor. And these two things, my private life and then my kind of representative life, when asked, they work really well because it's kind of funny how this wasn't something that I was present to when I was younger. But then when I started doing this work and I started doing this work more and more, and it became my really most important thing that I do, and most inspiring and most fun and most exciting and most horrible and most, the thing that I really wanted to do, it was my mom that said to me at some point, she was kind of like threw it like as an afterthought, right? She goes, well, of course you do this job, that's your DNA kicking in. And I'm like, right. It was kind of like written all along. It was like written in my code that I won't be able to shut up about this. And here we are. So I have we're doing a job that's never going to end, sadly, but we're doing it.
Yeah, that's a good way.
You too. You've taken on it's a big thing. I'm like, it's never going to get resolved. Anti-Semitism has been around for thousands of years, like literally thousands of years. It's not going anywhere.
I'm going to start saying that.
Yeah.
It's thousands of years old. It's never going to end, but we're doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and it's so true. Because like I said earlier, this all started, thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And, here we are thousands of years later, and we're still fighting the good fight. And
yes, we are.
We're doing it.
Thank you so much for doing it. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
I really feel like
we got this.
Yeah. No, it's good. And my last question, I'm American. And Americans, love asking people about their experience in the IDF and the role that they had in the IDF. What did you do when you were in the Army, and how did that experience? You're laughing because I'm right. Americans are always like, oh, like,
yeah, I know, but sadly, the reason I'm laughing is because obviously I've been asked this question since I moved here, right? And sadly, I just wish I had a tougher answer. Right. So again, if you read my book, people who have, there might be laughing right now. So I basically did a USO tour.
Okay.
I was a performer in the military. I was a singer and an actor. And they have it's called La Katzveit. They have these like military performing troops that they put together. It takes a very long time to get accepted. Like you have to audition like crazy because a lot of people want to join, and it's considered kind of like a step towards a success in or a career in entertainment later on. So I'm like, I want to do that, and I auditioned. I got in, and I did that for 2.5 years. So it wasn't tough at all, but it gave me a lot of experience, and also got a chance because as that performing in that unit, that performer, you travel the country every single day. So you basically go to a different base every day, and Sometimes it's the Air Force, sometimes it's the Golani, sometimes it's like, it depends. Sometimes it's a officers corps, sometimes whatever it is. And every single day I got a chance to be at a different military base around the country. And you get a very good perspective of like the country, the people, the military, the how it works, like the whole thing. That's a pretty great perspective. And you also get like to perform in front of, either like thousands of people and like a thing, or like three people in a kitchen in a little base somewhere. So it's a lot of experience, but sadly, it's not tough at all.
No, that sounds very interesting and like a lot of it
Yeah.
must have been really tough to serve your country that way. No, I'm
There are
kidding.
people who are actually fighting, having it way harder than I did.
That sounds awesome. Or
That was
your
fun.
experience, but like you're right. There's I love hearing about just how many different roles there are
Mhm.
in the IDF. Like not
Yeah.
everyone is a combat soldier or
No,
like,
not
a
at
Krav
all.
Maga instructor, something
No.
like really intense. Some people I went to grad school in Israel, and one of my
Oh, wow.
roommates went to
Where?
like I Tel Aviv University.
Nice. That's where I grew up. That's
Oh,
my neighborhood.
nice, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. And one of my roommates was like IT, like she just like reset people's computers when they, but
Yeah.
that was she was an IDF soldier,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, lots of ways to serve.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you
thank
so
you,
much.
thank you so much. I
No,
really
no, thank
enjoyed our
you.
conversation. Thank you.
I'm glad to be the first interview, and I hope this goes really well. And just really thank you for being an ally. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. I'm really glad that you were here, and I cannot think of a better first guest for this podcast.
Yay.